Hello and welcome back once again to Movie Reviews. Okay, so I went through the whole spiel last time during the Ant-Man review, so if you missed it, go back and check that out to know why it took me so long to get these out. But same day that I went and saw Ant-Man, I followed that with another movie. I was actually going to do a couple movies that day, but the times didn't fall right, so I was only able to do two. Which I really hate only doing one or two movies because I had to drive all the way across town to the other theater to see some of these because they don't play at this one, at the one closer to me. But so I usually try and see a couple things while I'm over there, usually at least two. I'm glad I actually got in a second movie instead of just going all the way over there just to see Ant-Man because that would have drove me nuts wasting all the gas to drive over there just for a movie. But the second movie I ended up seeing was Inside Out. I know that's probably been out for a little while. I actually didn't realize it had been released until I was looking to see if Ant-Man was playing over at the other theater. I was like, oh wow, Inside Out is out already. So I know it's been out for a little while, but I finally got around to seeing it. What did I think of Inside Out? It was, I don't want to say a cute movie, but it was a cute movie. I enjoyed it to a degree. Certain parts of it I thought dragged on a little bit. But overall, like the concept of the story, what's going on in this girl's life, I could actually relate to going through something sort of similar, not really. So, parts of it kind of tug at your heart. You're like, oh, that kind of reminds me of what I went through. But it kind of wraps it up in this psychological, how do I want to phrase that? Psychological view of it. They go into the psychology of what's going on in the girl's head, and that's the characters that you see of joy, sadness, anger, disgust, and fear? Is that the fifth one? The purple guy, is he fear? I don't remember. I think he's fear. He's always nervous about everything. So I'm going to guess he's fear or can't think of the other word that I want to use, but yeah, he's basically the cautious one of the group. Like everything could be danger, so just don't do it type of thing. So we start out with the girl being born. Then we get to meet Joy, because she's obviously the first emotion, because babies are always happy until they start crying, and then we meet Sadness. So I guess, I don't know if Sadness and Joy are technically sisters, or if they're all related, or how it works. But, so then it kind of jumps through the years of the girl growing up, and then we meet, we get introduced to anger and disgust and fear, or whatever the hell his name is. I could look it up, but I don't feel like it. So she gets to a point in her life, so basically the job of these 5 emotions in her head are to process memories. So Joy does her best to make every memory happy. There are other memories. They got the wall of memories behind them. Memories are stored in these little globes. And the wall behind them is mostly yellow, which is Joy's color. There's occasionally, like, a purple one for when she got afraid of something. There's an occasional green one, which is disgust. Red and blue, which red is anger, and blue is sadness. So there's a few peppered throughout, but it's mostly yellow. So then there's also the core memories, which define your personality. Something happened in your life that defines part of who you are, and those are the core memories. And all of them are yellow. I think there was 6 originally, and then I think a 7th one is created at some point. So they're up to 7, and then they kind of get to the point where the girl's happy and she'll always be happy. Nothing's ever going to change, and then everything changes. Her dad gets a new job, and they end up moving to I think they kind of lived out in the country at one point, and then they moved to a city. all her friends are in another area. You know, everything she knows is gone. So everything she knows is gone, and she's more sad than anything else, and it's mostly because sadness starts. Sadness is trying to clean or something, and every time she touches an orb, regardless of its emotion, it absorbs the blue and becomes a sad emotion or a sad memory. So even if it's a disgust memory or a fear memory or an anger memory, it becomes a sad memory, which makes sense psychologically because even remembering the times you were angry about something or disgusted by something, it can remind you of, before, and it can make you sad because, even though I was mad about that, at least I was there, I was home, I was with my friends, stuff like that. So it makes sense why all these orbs are absorbing sadness, but Joy doesn't understand it. So Joy starts freaking out like, sadness, stop touching everything, you're ruining everything. And then, so they make the move. The house is kind of old and dumpy. Her new school, she doesn't really know anyone. The teacher calls on her the first day, all that. And so she has to get up and talk in front of the class, so that's kind of a sad memory, because she gets upset about, missing her friends and everything back home. And I believe that forms the 8th core memory. But then everyone freaks out because when the core memory comes out, it's a sadness memory instead of all the joy memories, which are normally the core memories. So Joy freaks out and she's trying to stop it from going into the core memory storage. And, sadness is like, you can't do that. It's a core memory. You can't go against the system, type of thing. So they start fighting and all hell breaks loose and they end up getting sucked out of the main control center where the 5 of them live, and they get dumped into long-term memory storage. So then anger, disgust, and fear have to try and run everything on their own, which they're not used to doing because they only know how to project their own emotions. So of course everything that's happening in the girl's life, her parents are trying to make the best of this new situation, and like anger's running the control board, so of course the girl gets angry, or the dad makes a joke about something and disgust tries to push the button for how she thinks Joy would respond, but it's actually the way she would respond, so it's like type of thing. So it starts to cause trouble in the home because the girl's kind of acting out because obviously she's upset having to move away. Anyone who's ever had to move away as a child, you kind of can feel for her. So they're trying to do the best that they can to keep the ship up and running. Joy and sadness get stuck over in long-term memory storage, and they're like, well, we can use one of the... when the core memories are formed, they create these little islands that every time you access something that you like to do, that island lights up and becomes a thing. Like your imagination is part of Imagination Island, so that comes to life. If you're into a sport, that's on Sport Island. It's whatever the core memories are. So she has, I think there was six of those. Yeah, it was 6 because then the sadness one was going to be the 7th, but everything got blown all the crap. So we can, go through the islands to get back to the control center. But of course, to pad out the movie, every time they get to one of the islands, it happens to fall apart because of what anger, disgust, and fear are doing up in the control center. They're kind of wrecking this girl's life unintentionally, and every time they try to compensate for it, it ends up destroying a part of who she is. So the islands all fall apart, and Joy and Sadness are forced to go to the next one. And eventually they get to the point where they're down to their last option. Spoilers again. They're down to their last option, and finally, Joy's kind of blaming everything on Sadness, this is all your fault, blah, blah, blah. And then Joy ends up getting dumped into, what did they call it? It's basically like lost memories. There's this dumping ground where, like, the less you remember something, the orb turns like a dark gray, and once it becomes so dark that you can barely see it anymore, they toss it into the memory dump. I don't remember exactly what they call it, but basically that's where everything goes to be forgotten. Eventually, the orbs die out and fade away, and that's the end of those memories. That was the one part that didn't really make sense to me as far as like memories go, because even though you don't remember something anymore, someone could eventually say something and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that, and then like all these memories come flooding back to you. And that's not part of like long-term memory, because you would remember it more frequently. It's a part of something that you've forgotten that's basically gone until somebody says something, and then the memory floods back. So when they say, these old memories eventually go to the memory dump, and that's it, they're gone, that isn't accurately the way the mind works. So that's a little flaw in the story, but it's there for the dramatic effect of it. There's another part that, as a kid's movie, this thing should have done that they didn't, which I'll get into later. So, finally Joy ends up in the memory dump, and again, spoilers. So she's kind of figures, okay, it's over, I'm done, I'm never getting out of here. And she starts looking at the core memories, which she has in her hand from when they got sucked out of the control center. The core memories went with her because they were all over the floor when they got sucked out. So she's gathered them all up and puts them in this bag, and she's looking at one of the core memories, and she's like rewinding it and letting it play through, and then she accidentally rewinds it back too far, and the whole orb changes color. And she looks at it kind of oddly, like, wait, what? And then she realizes that it was a sad memory. What made it a core memory was that it kind of enveloped everything. It was a sad moment that became happy, that became joyful, and that's what made it a core memory. And then she kind of realized that sadness was just as important to the whole aspect of everything as she was, because you can't be happy all the time. Sometimes there has to be sadness, but then from that sadness comes joy. So she realizes that basically, like, as they're trying to get back to the command center, every time Sadness is trying to tell her something, she kind of doesn't listen. She's like, no, let's do it this, my way's better, type of thing. Kind of like in the other movies where the parents never listen to the kid, except they're kind of sisters, but yeah. So finally she realizes that she was wrong and she should have been listening to Sadness the whole time, because Sadness has been right about everything. And she realizes that it's not her, Joy, that needs to get back to the control center, it's Sadness. Sadness is the one that can fix everything. So she almost gets to the point where she's ready to sacrifice herself just to get Sadness back there, but then they both make it back. Again, spoiler. It's a kid's movie. They're going to make it back and everything will be fine. So they make it back, and, everyone's like, oh, Joy's back, you can fix everything. And she's like, no, Sadness, you'll have to fix it. And Sadness is kind of afraid at first. She's like, but I just screw everything up. And she's like, no, trust me, just do what you do. Why am I getting so much echo in here? But she's like, no, trust me, just do what you do. I know it's wrong. So Sadness goes over and starts running the control board, and this is the first time in a while that the girl has actually expressed sadness. She's expressed joy most of her life. Recently she's been acting out, expressing fear and disgust and anger. This is the first time she's actually been able to express sadness in a while. So sadness, the emotion of sadness pouring out of her actually makes everything fall into place. Everything comes back together, and then that's when Joy realizes that all five of them are just as important as she is. It's not just her show. So everything kind of gets set right, and the original islands that were destroyed don't actually come back, but variations of them come back. The core memories, I don't know, they didn't really reinstitute them into the core drive, but I guess, new ones formed and created new islands, or like somehow they all pieced together. And that was caused by another core memory form that was half yellow, half blue. So they realized that emotions can mix to create memories. So then, like, the whole wall turns into these little spiral patterns of like green and purple, or red and yellow, or red and blue, or some variation of multiple emotions, creating this one memory. So they finally realized that they have a bigger purpose. And that's more or less the end of the movie. Everyone kind of goes on and lives happily ever after. The girl gets her life back together, even though she's in a new place. Yeah, so without spoiling too much of it, that's the gist of the movie. Like I said, I did enjoy it. I can relate to some of it because when I was a kid, lived in the same place basically from the time I was 3 until the time I was just out of 6th grade, getting ready to go into 7th grade, and my mother decided, oh, we're going to move. And it was only across town. It was like 7 miles away, but it was a new school. All my friends, were gone. Well, they were going to the school I should have been going to, so I didn't really get to see everyone anymore. It was a long trip. 7 miles for a kid is a long trip, even when you got a bike or rollerblades or whatever. Parents don't always want to drive you over to your friend's house, so everyone's kind of distant, and it kind of changes everything about you, and so to a degree I could relate to what the girl was going through. My move wasn't quite as big as hers was. I didn't really go through all the outlashing. I just kind of more or less became a shut-in. I was just like, I don't have any friends to go out and do anything with, and so I'm just going to sit in my room and play video games and play on my computer and watch movies, and hey, here I am today. Hi. So yeah, I can kind of relate to it. So it was a fun movie. Again, some aspects of the way the mind was set up didn't flow properly, as far as my understanding of how thought and memory works. But I understand why they did it, to give some type of a feeling of dread towards the movie. Like there has to be something for the heroes to overcome, otherwise it's pointless. If they can just walk back to the control center, it kind of defeats the purpose of anything going on. There's no development or anything like that. So the memory dump, like I said, that kind of falls out. The one thing I thought was kind of off about the ending, you got these happily ever after moments. At one point in the movie, Sadness and Joy encounter what used to be the girl's imaginary friend when she was little. He's, still hanging around in long-term memory, so he's still there somewhere. She's still, some aspect of her still remembers him, but not that much. And he ends up with Joy falling into the memory dump. And basically he sacrifices himself to get Joy out of the memory dump. Again, spoiler. But when everything comes back together at the end, normally in a kid's movie, he would have been resurrected somehow. He would have came back somehow. And it doesn't happen. And the part that really bothers me is they have a dream sequence where he actually appears in the dream. So the girl is accessing a memory of him at that point for the dream. So he's fresh in her mind, like, oh wow, I haven't thought about him in years, even though she doesn't say it in the film, because he was in her dream, it's kind of like, oh wow, I haven't thought about him in years type of thing. But then when he falls into the memory dump, he's just gone. He vanishes, melts away or whatever, and he's never resurrected. So how would a fresh memory like that automatically be dumped? And that's, I just feel like as everything came back together, he should have somehow been reformed. They always say nothing ever comes back from the memory dump, but Joy got out before she disintegrated. He disintegrated, but it seems like he should have somehow came back into existence, because, like I said, it was a fresh memory from the dream. Unless she just didn't remember that part of her dream, but yeah. So that was kind of the only down bit of the ending of the movie is that guy was just, oh, he died. They don't really say it flat out, but he's gone. He's not coming back. So that was another downfall I had as far as like how memory works. But overall, it wasn't bad. I could look past it. Most kids probably look past it. So as far as a star rating on this one, what am I going to give it? Was it a great movie? It's about average with Pixar movies. Is that Pixar? Yeah, that was Pixar. It's about average with Pixar movies, like Toy Story or Up or any of those. You kind of know what's going to happen. It's just the ride getting you there is what's interesting. And this was an interesting concept going into the emotional aspect or the emotional spectrum of the inside of a young girl's head when she's faced with these life-changing events. So it was an interesting take on how to get us on this emotional roller coaster, but overall it was the same emotional roller coaster we're always on with a Pixar film. But one thing about Pixar is they always do these really well. So overall, I'm not going to rate it based on it being a kids movie or an adult movie type of thing. I really try to avoid that with animated features because it's always going to be a better kids movie than probably an adult movie, but at the same time it has stuff for adults. I'm going to base it based on, like I said, the other Pixar films. As far as the other Pixar films, it's basically it's basically the same as almost everything else. Other than the mental aspect of it, nothing really makes it stand out above the others. So for this one, based on other Pixar films, I'm going to say it's I was going to say a 3, but like I said, I do like the mental aspect of it, so I'm going to give it a 3.5. It's a middle-of-the-road Pixar movie, but it has an interesting spin on being a Pixar film, if that makes sense. So yeah, we're going to go 3.5 on this one. And that's pretty much it for this review. Got a couple more coming up. Like I said, I'm trying to spit these out now that I got a break where the roommates are gone and my head congestion's starting to dissipate to where I can actually talk and breathe and not be coughing every 3 seconds or blowing my nose every 3 seconds like I was yesterday. So going to be a couple more of these coming up. Also, I do got a couple other things for product placement. They're sitting in the fridge right now. Just kind of waiting for the rest of this to pass so I can actually taste things. I don't want, the taste test of something to be offset by my being ill. It was like I was eating, what did I have last night? I got some French fries or something, and there was no salt on them. I put the salt on them, and normally I put the same amount of salt on them every time. But for some reason last night they just tasted like overly salty. And I don't know if it's just because, I'm so congested that I'm actually tasting more of the salt than I normally do. But I don't want that to be a factor going into the taste test of the products that I have. So I'm kind of waiting till I'm fully over this before I do those. Unfortunately, by then they'll probably have already been discontinued and out of the store, so you won't be able to find them. But I did buy them, and they're sitting right over here, so I do want to get them done. So that'll be coming up along with these movie reviews, but I'll probably end up doing the movie reviews first. So there'll probably be more movie reviews first, followed by a couple product placements, and I think I still got 2 recorded video game segments I can push out. So there's going to be probably another 10 videos or so coming up pretty soon. But until then, that's it for this review. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, we'll see you at the movies.